Hey guys, it's Jen. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another video. So in today's video, I am very excited. This has been a long time in the making, but I am sharing with you Pioneer Woman's top 10 recipes. Now, I do not know how these top 10 recipes were chosen, but I was watching YouTube one day and I had a notification pop up from Food Network because I follow their YouTube channel, and it popped up, these are the Pioneer Woman's top 10 recipes. And so what I thought I would do is a fun spin on that is cook all of them for you. And what I'm going to do is not only cook the recipes for you, but I'm also going to share with you what our thoughts were on them, because I think that part is really important too. Even when you have someone that's really like well-known in the culinary industry, I think it's really important to still test their recipes, because not every recipe is going to turn out for everyone. As you'll see in this video, I had several recipes that didn't turn out and I would not make again. So in this video, I am going to be making chocolate peanut butter pie, an Asian noodle salad, a raspberry cream pie, a sour cream noodle bake, meat pies, a chicken mozzarella pasta, a fresh herb pizza, baked eggs in hash brown cups, triple layered confetti cake, which I'm actually going to be turning into cupcakes, and then an ice cream layer cake. So come along with me as we cook the Pioneer Woman's top 10 recipes. As always, I will have everything linked down below, all of the tools I used, all of the original recipes on foodnetwork.com. So let's get started.
All right, so the first thing that we're going to start with is the raspberry cream pie. So this is sort of tastes like a raspberry ice cream pie with an Oreo crust. I'm going to start out by washing my raspberries. I just put those in my OXO salad spinner and soak them with a little bit of vinegar and cold water until they are nice and clean, and then rinse them off and make sure I dry them really well. So to make the crust, I did use my food processor. If you don't have a food processor, you could definitely just put your Oreo cookies in a Ziploc bag and crush it up with a rolling pin. I do think that the food processor just makes it so much easier. So I just put 25 Oreo cookies in there and then just basically pulse it until all of the cookies are mixed into fine crumbs. You can go ahead and pour in 4 tablespoons of melted butter and then mix that until it's all combined. I have a Pyrex deep dish glass pie dish, which I really like using for pies because it's nice and deep and it has plenty of room to pour the filling in. So I'm just using my fingers to press that into the glass dish nice and evenly. Try to make sure that you get the crust both evenly on the bottom of the pie dish and on the sides as well. And then after that's done, we'll put this in the oven and bake it at 350 degrees for about 4 to 5 minutes. It really doesn't take very long, and you want to make sure that you don't burn it. So for the raspberry filling, you'll need some raspberries. Just go ahead and put those in a bowl and save the rest for topping the pie with. You can mash those up with a fork, and then you'll add some sugar to that and just continue mashing it until you sort of have like a raspberry paste, but it's obviously sweetened because you're putting sugar in it. Later, when we make the filling, you'll stir this into that, and then that's what will make the filling for your pie. So here's a quick look at the crust when it came out of the oven. Make sure you let this cool before you put the filling in it, or the filling will start to melt. So for the filling, I just have 2 containers. They're 6 ounces each of plain, raspberry yogurt. I just got the store brand. So I'm putting those into a bowl. And as you can see throughout this video, I was watching YouTube, different YouTube videos as I was doing my cooking. So you guys can enjoy that right along with me. To the yogurt, I added 1 3.4 ounce package of instant vanilla pudding, and then I'll add 1 cup of heavy cream and just beat that together. I'm using my hand mixer just because it was easier than dragging out my KitchenAid stand mixer. Just beat that together for about 2 to 2.5 minutes until the mixture is nice and thick. Once it is all combined, you can add the raspberry puree, and I tried to not stir this up a whole lot. I kind of wanted to leave it so that the raspberry puree was a little bit swirled throughout the yogurt, so I made sure that I didn't, whip it up with the mixer. So after your crust is cooled, you can go ahead and put the filling into the pie and just smooth out the top with a spatula and make sure that it's nice and even. Then you're going to cover this with plastic wrap and throw it in the freezer. I froze this for about 3 to 4 hours, and that was perfect. I took it out and it was easy to slice. Now, if you do leave it in there for longer than that, it will freeze solid. So I would just recommend, if you're making it like more than 6 hours in advance, just make sure that you take it out of the freezer in enough time to soften before you serve it. We topped this with some whipped cream and some fresh raspberries, and it was really delicious.
Okay, so I just wanted to share with you guys really quickly what we thought of the raspberry cream pie. It was delicious. I would totally make it again. I definitely think that you need the extra whipped cream and the raspberries on the top. I think that that just makes the dish. It does taste a little bit like an ice cream consistency, so it doesn't freeze quite solid. All of us loved it. Connor loved it, especially. He was like, "Thank you for the pie, mommy." So yes, would definitely make again.
Next up is the sour cream noodle bake. This is perfect for a freezer meal or a make-ahead meal. I actually ended up splitting this recipe in half and putting it in 2 different trays. One for my grandparents because my grandma has been sick and I wanted to be able to bring them a couple different dishes to make. And then I put one in the fridge for us to have later in the week. So this sort of reminds me of a lasagna, but it definitely doesn't have that strong Italian flavor like a lasagna does. My sister has been making this recipe for a while and actually told me a while back that I needed to make it. So I was happy to have the chance to do that. So what you see me doing here is just sauteing a pound of ground beef in a skillet with a little bit of olive oil. I seasoned it with salt and pepper, and I'm just using my mix and chop from Pampered Chef to break that up into small pieces while it is sauteing. After the ground beef is cooked, you'll just add 1 can, a 15-ounce can of regular tomato sauce. Season that with salt and pepper, but make sure you go light on the salt here. The rest of the ingredients are really rich, and so I just want to caution you not to add too much salt to the tomato sauce. But that will just simmer on the stove until it is a little bit thickened, and then you can set it aside until it is time to assemble the dish. So that is the sauce component. I have a pot of salted water boiling here, and I'm just going to boil 8 ounces of egg noodles. This is half of a large package, and like I said, this made definitely enough, I would say, for 6 to 8 people. So while the noodles are boiling, I'm going to make the sour cream mixture that goes with the noodles. So I'm just putting some sour cream in a large bowl along with some cottage cheese. I always like to use 4% cottage cheese, but that's just my personal preference. You could use any kind that you wanted. I'm seasoning that with some pepper, and then I'm also going to chop up some green onions after I wash those and dry them off a little bit, and add those into the sour cream mixture as well. When the noodles were done cooking, I did go ahead and rinse those in cold water and drain them really well just to stop the cooking and stop them from sticking together. I put those in that large bowl along with the sour cream and cottage cheese mixture, and I'm just stirring that up really, really well. So for these, you also need some shredded cheddar cheese. So I had this block of white cheddar cheese in the refrigerator that I'm trying to use up, and so I just used that and hand shredded it. You could definitely use mozzarella cheese or like pre-shredded cheese if you wanted to. Pretty much any type of shredded cheese would work in this recipe. I got these smaller freezer type pans from Walmart. I actually like them a lot because I think that they have a nice smaller portion than the regular freezer pans that I'm used to. So I put a layer of pasta in the bottom. Next, I'm layering on some of that tomato and beef sauce, and then another layer of the shredded cheese. And then I'll just repeat the layers one more time until all of the ingredients are used up. So this is the point that you would freeze these if you wanted to do so, or if you're going to make them that same week, you could also put them in the refrigerator. I did label them with the directions for my grandparents, and they really enjoyed it. Here's a look at the one that I baked. You can see that it turned out nice and sort of melty on the top. And here's a look at it on the plate. Definitely sort of reminiscent of lasagna, but a different taste for sure.
So thoughts on Pioneer Woman's sour cream noodle bake. I really liked it and Adam really liked it. Now, the kids did not eat this batch because I put green onions in it and I just made half a batch, and I thought I'm gonna try it first and see what I think. I think they would not eat it with the green onions in it, probably. It tastes really good, like it's really rich. If I was gonna make it again for the kids, I would probably, I don't know, I feel like I might have to blend the cottage cheese up because they're not like huge fans of sour cream or cottage cheese. And I feel like there's still like chunks in there that would freak them out. I know, I'm really not like into like high maintenance food for my kids, but anyway, that's just my thoughts on it. Like if you have kids that are picky about that stuff, and I would probably put onion powder instead of green onion. But like as it was cooked, it was really, really good. Like I think it is a delicious dish. And I would definitely make it again, maybe with those modifications if I was making it for kids. And also I would say don't salt the meat sauce too much, because I feel like once you get all the cheese in there and the richness of the sour cream, the meat sauce does not need a lot of salt. But overall, really, really good.
Next, we are making a cold Asian noodle salad. Now, full disclosure, I have made this recipe before. This was the only one I had actually made before, and I knew it was delicious. So I am using thin spaghetti for this recipe. I just boiled it and then rinsed it in cold water. I think maybe the original recipe called for fettuccine, but I figured what the heck, they're both kind of the same, and obviously it worked out just fine. So while the pasta was cooking and rinsing, I went ahead and made the dressing for this pasta salad. Now, I did actually use about half the pasta that the recipe called for. This recipe has so many fresh veggies that I really don't think you need all that pasta, so it's definitely personal preference, but it does make a huge amount. So this is something that if you wanted to take it to like a party or a potluck, it would be a perfect dish for that. So to the bowl, I am adding some olive oil, soy sauce, oyster sauce, sesame oil, some rice vinegar, and some brown sugar. And you'll see in a little bit that after I tasted the dressing, I thought it needed a little bit more acidity, and so I did end up adding the juice of 1 lime. I would definitely suggest that if you make this recipe. I think it does make it taste a lot better. I'm also using fresh ginger, so I just grate this with a microplane right over the bowl. If you didn't want to do this step, you could definitely just buy the ginger paste. They store it, or they have it in the store in the produce section by all the other herbs and garlic. So I'm also going to add some garlic paste, or if you wanted to, you could use a garlic press or mince up your own garlic. I'm whisking that up really well with a whisk, obviously tasting it, and that's when I decide it needs some lime. So I'm going to add that. I do really like this juicer. It's available on Amazon. I'll link it down below. I actually did not have a citrus juicer for the longest time, probably. I actually just got one maybe like 4 years ago or so, and I love it. I would never go back to not having a citrus juicer. So next, I'm going to work on chopping up the veggies. So, this is really flexible in terms of what vegetables you can add to it. I think I did deviate a little bit from the original recipe, but for the most part stayed pretty true. So I'm using some English cucumber. One thing I would say is when you're making this, you just want to make sure that you chop your vegetables into sort of smaller pieces. That way it's easier to eat because you are using like the long spaghetti noodles. So I'm also going to add some red pepper, some shredded carrot, and some cabbage. I actually just bought the coleslaw mix and it made it super easy to just toss it in there. I also just posted a video on how to chop produce where I showed you guys how I chop all my produce and what different tools I use. So I'll also link that video down below if you're interested in watching that. Next, I'm going to chop up some cilantro. I love cilantro. I'm one of those people that can't get enough of it, so I added a ton of it. If you don't like cilantro, you could consider adding parsley or maybe just green onions. after I got all of the veggies added to the dressing, I added the spaghetti noodles and then tried to toss it up with some tongs as best I could. You could see that there's a lot in this bowl, so I ended up spilling some, but I just did the best I can and tried to toss it really thoroughly. The dressing is obviously in the bottom, so you want to make sure that you just kind of bring it up through all of the pasta and the veggies and mix it all together as best you can. So this is a great meal prep actually for the week. It will keep in the fridge for about 3 to 4 days, I would say, and it's really refreshing and delicious, and I totally love it. So here's what it looks like on the plate. Like I said, it's great for meal prep, or you could also have it as a side for dinner if you are grilling out.
All right, so thoughts on the Asian noodle salad. Really good, although I kind of already knew that because I've made it before, but it's been a really long time, but I forgot how much that I liked it. It's really good for meal prep. It's really good to bring to a party, and the only modifications that I made were using only about half the spaghetti that it called for. I just felt like it didn't really need any more noodles with than that, especially with all the veggies in there. And I added the juice of 1 lime to the dressing, and it was perfect. So I would definitely make that again. It's a keeper. It's going in my recipe binder.
Another thing I wanted to mention quickly about that noodle salad is you could add chicken or salmon or shrimp to it if you wanted to make it more protein filled. That would be delicious as well. All right, so the next thing that I'm going to show you is a chocolate peanut butter pie. This is another recipe that I had seen of Pioneer Woman's and had never tried. I personally love the combination of chocolate and peanut butter. I'm not a huge desserts person, but if I'm going to eat dessert, I would like to have either chocolate and peanut butter, or cheesecake probably are my 2 top things that I would eat. So same as with the raspberry cream pie, I'm just pulsing some Oreo cookies in my food processor and then adding some melted butter and just combining that together. Same with this. I will also put that into my deep dish Pyrex pie plate and press it in and then bake it in the oven for a couple minutes just until the Oreo cookies are set. I do think that they sell like pre-made Oreo cookie crusts in the grocery store, but I have tried those before and I just don't think that they're as good as a homemade one. But if you are in a pinch and you're short on time, you could definitely substitute that if you had to. So as far as the ingredient list for this recipe, it's actually pretty simple. The only thing that you need for the filling for the pie is peanut butter, cream cheese, powdered sugar, and Cool Whip. So I did make some changes to this recipe just to make it a little bit more healthy. I used Swerve powdered sugar, which is keto friendly. This recipe is obviously not keto friendly, but it's a low carb, low calorie substitute instead of using regular powdered sugar. So I went ahead and substituted that. I also used the 1/3 less fat cream cheese instead of regular cream cheese. I did just use regular peanut butter, but I used the light Cool Whip. So I knew that this recipe was going to be really good, but also really rich and have a lot of calories. And so it did end up turning out really well with those modifications. So if you do want to make this a little bit healthier, you could totally make those substitutions and have it turn out fine. So I use my stand mixer for this. I just found it easier and whipped it up until all of the filling ingredients were combined just like that and nice and fluffy. You can see Connor down there at the end of the counter. He's eating cherry tomatoes and reading a book and licking the beater. Oh, to be a kid again. Isn't that such a carefree life? Did you guys lick the beaters when you were little? I used to love doing that when my mom would make cookies and cakes. So here you go. Here is the completed pie. You just put that in the refrigerator and let it set up. Super delicious. You can top it with more whipped cream if you'd like, but it is really, really rich.
All right, so I wanted to give you guys an update of how we liked the peanut butter pie. This recipe is definitely a winner. Is it healthy as written? No. Is it healthy even with the modifications that I made? Probably not, but I felt okay with, you know, substituting the Swerve for the powdered sugar, the light cream cheese for the regular cream cheese, and the light Cool Whip. I didn't calculate out the calories or anything like that, but I'm quite sure that it was many less calories and sugar than it would have been normally, and it tasted just as good. The only thing I would suggest with this is that it makes one pie, but it's gonna serve a lot of people because you really need to cut the slices small because it is so rich. Now, I'm a person that I don't eat a lot of sweets, but one of the things that I really like is chocolate and peanut butter together. So to me, I really loved it, and I would consider making it again for like a family gathering, maybe where a lot of people, you know, would have the chance to eat it. Another thing I thought of for portion control is, and I might try doing this the next time, is doing like the mini, kind of like you do with the mini cheesecakes. So like using an Oreo in the bottom of a muffin tin and then putting the peanut butter mixture on top of that and then refrigerating them that way. That way you just kind of have a bite, not like a bite, but you know, just a little portion control rather than a huge pie. So I might try that in the future, but overall I think this recipe is really a winner. And if you are wanting some indulgence in chocolate peanut butter, then I would suggest it.
Next up is this fresh herb pizza. So when I saw this on the list, I was actually pretty excited because it's been a long time since I've made homemade pizza dough. So I do have a dish of warm water here. I'm just going to take some active dry yeast and sprinkle that over the top of the warm water. The warm water will help activate it, and then you'll mix this with the flour mixture to create your dough. So here I am adding flour to my mixing bowl and watching Fallon from Moss Family TV. So Fallon, if you're watching, hi, say hi in the comments. I'm watching you while I'm making my pizza dough. I told you guys sometimes I don't always pay attention to what I'm filming as far as if I have my phone in the shot when I'm watching YouTube while I'm cooking. So at any rate, I'm just going to mix the ingredients for the dough in my stand mixer. This is the easiest way to do it. So you'll need obviously the yeast, flour, salt, and some olive oil for the dough. And then I went ahead and poured the warm water and yeast mixture in and mixed that together. So after that's mixed, you will want to let this rise. So I'm just coating a mixing bowl with olive oil, and then I'll put the dough in there and turn it over so that all sides of the dough ball are greased. I'll cover that with plastic wrap and set it in a warm spot in the kitchen for about an hour to an hour and a half until it is risen. So fun fact, as I was making this recipe, I was actually having a photo shoot in my kitchen. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you know I did that a couple weeks ago. If you don't follow me on Instagram, what are you doing? You need to follow me over there. It's just Jen Chapin, Jenchapin. So come over there and follow me. Obviously, once the dough is risen, you want to roll that out with a rolling pin. You want to pause a little bit so your photographer can get a good action shot of you. No, seriously though, I am planning a meal prep e-course, and so that is why I had a photographer come over and take some pictures of me for that. I'm super happy with them. But if you want to sign up for the email list to get notified when that class comes out, I'll leave a link to sign up for that in the description box below. The scheduled release date is the end of July. Okay, so back to the actual pizza. I rolled the dough out. I put it on a baking sheet that was lined with parchment paper. I brushed the dough with some olive oil, sprinkled it with salt and pepper. Now I'm just slicing up some fresh mozzarella and putting that on the pizza. You can bake that in the oven at 450 degrees until the cheese is nice and bubbly and browned on the top, and then you'll top it with your arugula and your herbs. So I did take a little bit of creative license with this recipe. I don't think that it originally called for tossing the arugula with the lemon and olive oil, but I felt like it needed that. So I just have some arugula in a bowl that I toss with those things, and then I'm just topping the pizza very slowly so she can take a picture of me. You guys, seriously, like, it was like super fun, and she was so professional, and I really enjoyed doing it, but also it was just kind of awkward. Like, I'm not someone that enjoys being the center of attention in that way. Like, I don't really enjoy being photographed. I don't know. It's weird. You know what I mean? If you, I mean, I don't mind being photographed. It's just not my favorite thing in the world. So I also topped the pizza with some sliced red onion, which the recipe did not call for, but it turned out really well. I would recommend it. And then I went and got some herbs from my back deck. So just some parsley, and some basil, chop those up and put them on top as well, along with a drizzle of the balsamic vinegar syrup. I get this at Trader Joe's. If you don't have that, you could just use regular balsamic vinegar. It would work just fine. But once that's done, you can go ahead and cut it up. This would be really great for like a vegetarian option or for a party or an appetizer as well.
Thoughts on the fresh herb pizza? Delicious. This recipe is a keeper. I would say for sure the way it's made. I would also recommend just, using the pizza dough recipe part of it. I think it would be really good to have with like a traditional tomato sauce like that. It's really good. I love it. I will definitely be making this again. I think it would be fun to do this like for an appetizer, for book club, or yeah, I don't know. I love it.
All right, here we go. Next up is an ice cream layer cake. So this is a really fun recipe. It's super easy. It's definitely something that your kids can help you with and would enjoy doing. You'll want to start out with a frozen pound cake. I use the Sara Lee brand. I think really that's the only brand, or at least that's the only brand I've seen in stores around here. I also buy this a lot to do like strawberry shortcake with, but for this recipe, you want to slice it in half lengthwise into 3 layers. Line the pan with some plastic wrap, and then you'll basically build your ice cream cake in that pan. So you'll put the first layer of cake in the pan, and then you will want to set your ice cream out on the counter for about 20 minutes before you use it, just to make sure that it's nice and spreadable. Scoop some vanilla ice cream in there, and then you can chop up whatever candies you want. I forget what the actual recipe called for, but I just went ahead and used some mini Reese's peanut butter cups and some mini M&Ms, which is what my kids really like the most. After you sprinkle those on there, you can put the next layer of cake on and then spread the next layer of ice cream on. The original recipe also called for chocolate chip ice cream, but I already had vanilla and I didn't want to buy a bunch of containers of ice cream and just have those sitting around my house. So I just used 2 layers of vanilla ice cream and 2 layers of chocolate, and it worked out just fine. You could use really any, flavor of ice cream that you wanted. The only thing I will say about this recipe is I feel like once you got the layers of ice cream and candy in there, it was a little bit tall for the pan. So maybe if I did it in the future, I might try to use one of my own loaf pans or a different dish. Once the last layer of ice cream is on, you will pour on a whole bottle of the Magic Shell, which is that chocolate syrup that hardens when it hits the cold ice cream, and then sprinkle your candies on the top. Obviously, at this point, you'll want to have all your kids come in the kitchen and start stealing the ice cream and stealing the candy and, eating ice cream out of the bucket, so on and so forth. Make sure that you do this step or it obviously will not taste right.
So the ice cream cake. The kids really thought this was super fun. Adam liked it. I'm not a huge sweets person. I know I've mentioned that before, and so it wasn't like a huge hit for me, but I do think it's something easy and fun, especially kids can help you with it. They like that there's candy in it. So I don't know that I'd make it again, but it is fun to try, and it's a super easy recipe.
The next thing that I'm going to show you guys is a recipe for baked eggs in hash brown cups. This is another Pioneer Woman recipe that I had seen previously and was curious to make it. So I just have 3 baking potatoes here. I cut this recipe in half and it ended up making, I think, 12 muffins. So I baked these potatoes the day previously and just put them in the refrigerator in a Ziploc bag so that they would be ready for breakfast the following morning. I tried to peel off a little bit of the skin. You can see I kind of had some trouble with that there, but honestly it probably doesn't matter if you peel it off or not. And then I'm just using a regular box grater to grate the remainder of the potato into a bowl. Make sure that you do grate it into a bowl because you are going to be mixing the potato with salt and pepper before you pack it into the muffin tins. So after the potato is grated into the bowl, you can just season the mixture with salt and pepper. Just kind of toss it around with your hands to make sure that all of that seasoning gets coated in, or what am I trying to say? distributed into the potatoes. Can't talk today. And then you want to grease your muffin tin really, really well. I have to say, even though I sprayed this with cooking spray, these stuck so bad. And I can't tell if this is a nonstick muffin tin or not. I kind of feel like it's supposed to be, but it definitely didn't work that way. But essentially, you just want to put a little bit of the potatoes into each well of the muffin tin. And then you're making a crust to sort of hold the egg. So just push it down into the bottom and up the sides of the muffin tin. One thing you could do too is season the potatoes with a little bit of garlic powder. I feel like maybe that would be good, but honestly, you guys will see at the end of this that these did not come out worth a darn. They stuck to the pan. If I was going to try to make these again, which I probably won't, I would definitely probably use silicone baking cups, because I think that's probably the only way that they would come out. Either that or make sure that you have like a true nonstick skillet. Not a nonstick skillet, a non-stick muffin tray is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so the recipe says to pre-bake the hash brown cups, which you can see here. Like you can see here, you just take those out of the oven and then crack an egg into each one. I made some with whole eggs, and then I also made some with like scrambled eggs because I didn't know if the yolk would be runny or not. Adam likes runny yolks. My kids really aren't too wild about them. And since I wasn't sure if the yolks were going to end up runny, I wanted to make some with just plain scrambled eggs. So I put these back in the oven at 400 degrees for about 15 minutes, which is what the recipe said, and they were way too cooked. They were almost like hard-boiled eggs in the middle of the muffin tins. So I tried on this one, guys, but I probably wouldn't make it again.
All right, so thoughts on the baked eggs in the hash brown nests? That is a big no. I cannot recommend this recipe. If you've tried something like this and it's worked for you, let me know what you did. I followed the instructions. I just thought they were really bland. Everything stuck to the inside of the muffin tin, and they just weren't all that good. The eggs came out way overcooked, almost like hard-boiled eggs, and I thought it was going to be more of like a runny egg in the middle, which I don't really care for, but Adam really likes. So anyway, this recipe is a fail. I would not recommend it.
Next up on the top 10 recipe list is this confetti cake. So if you take a look at the original recipe, it's actually a triple layer confetti cake. I didn't really have the need to make a huge cake for anything, and so rather than do that and waste a lot of it, I decided to cut the recipe in half and make cupcakes out of it, which actually worked out pretty well. So in a bowl, I'm just whisking my dry ingredients. So I'm using all-purpose flour, cake flour, baking powder, and kosher salt. And then you will want to have a ideally a stand mixer for this recipe. If you don't have one, you could probably make it with a hand mixer, but as you'll see later, the frosting that we're going to make is like a meringue frosting, and you do need to beat it for an extended period of time. So that's obviously when the stand mixer comes in really handy. So once the dry ingredients are whisked together, I'm going to set that aside, and then I am going to cream my butter and sugar together. So I'll just do that with the paddle attachment in my KitchenAid mixer. I know I've mentioned this before, but even if you don't do a lot of baking, and I actually, well, I mean, I do a fair amount of baking, but not a ton, I would recommend, a KitchenAid mixer. It's something that really is going to last you for your whole entire life. In fact, I think my mom still has hers from her original wedding, which was many years ago. And I have the same one that I actually got in college. My mom gave it to me as a Christmas present one year. So it's not fancy. I don't have one that has like a fancy color. It's just plain white. And I don't have the one with the bowl that lifts up and down, but it's perfect for me. And I use it a lot even to make things like dips and meatballs and savory dishes too. The next step is to add in your egg whites, and so I'm just separating those out into a bowl. I went ahead and threw the yolks away. If you guys have tips on this, I don't really know what to save them for unless I'm making like scrambled eggs or something like that. I don't know if I can put them in the fridge. That's one thing I'm kind of bad at as far as when I have to separate eggs. I usually end up wasting the other part, but you can just put the egg whites in there and beat that until it comes together. You will also add some vanilla. And then at the end is when you add your dry ingredients, alternating with whole milk. And then after everything is combined, you're just going to use some rainbow sprinkles to make it the confetti cake. So this is actually the first time in a while, like a long while, that I have made a cake from scratch. Typically, if I'm going to make cake or cupcakes, I always just buy the box mix because one, it's easy, and two, I think most of the time it actually tastes better than making a cake from scratch. This cake was actually really good, I think, because of the use of the cake flour as well as the all-purpose flour. I do think I baked it a little bit too long, so just a word of caution there. And yes, I am watching my own video because on this day I had posted a video, and after it posts to YouTube, I always watch it back to make sure that there's not anything wrong with it or like it's not screwed up. I want to watch it like as soon as it goes live just to make sure that I can pull it early if needed. I've only actually had to do that one time. But anyway, okay, next thing I need to do is put the cupcake batter into the cupcake paper liners. So I just have a regular muffin tin here with regular paper liners. I spray those with a little bit of cooking spray, and I'm just using an ice cream scoop to scoop those out into the individual cupcake tins, and then I will put that in the oven. I started at 350 for 15 minutes. I would say these probably need around 20 to 25 minutes, but pull them before you think that they're all the way done, because I felt like these continued cooking a little bit more than regular cupcakes, like from a box mix, and I felt like they could have been a little bit underdone. Or I felt like I could have cooked them less time, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So while those cooled, I'm working on the frosting. So like I said, this is more of like a meringue frosting. So I have a glass bowl set over some simmering water, and I'm just whisking together some egg whites and some sugar. You'll want to whisk this together for about 2 to 3 minutes or until the sugar is completely dissolved in the egg whites, and then you will combine this with the rest of the ingredients for the meringue. Okay, so I'm just putting the egg white mixture into the bowl of my KitchenAid, and I have the whisk attachment on it. I'm going to whisk this for about 5 minutes, and then, whisk it on medium speed for about 5 minutes, and then increase the speed to medium high and whisk it for 5 more minutes until you get stiff glossy peaks. Now once your meringue is sort of formed there and the bowl of the mixer is cool, you can start adding your butter. Now take it from me, you want to use unsalted butter in this recipe. I honestly didn't even pay attention, and typically, since I don't bake a lot, I usually buy salted butter. So I went ahead and just took my softened butter and put it into the mixer in chunks and slowly incorporated it until everything was whisked together. Okay, so once everything was all incorporated, I just took a spatula just to make sure that everything, that there were no chunks of butter in there, and I'm going to go ahead and frost the cupcakes. So the best thing for frosting cupcakes is an offset spatula. My small offset spatula was actually in the dishwasher, so I couldn't use that. I'm using my larger one, which is normally what I use to frost cakes. You wouldn't think that this would make a difference, and I used to always just frost cupcakes and things like that with a butter knife, but an offset spatula really does help. And there's a couple different options. You can get them on Amazon, which I'll link several down below, or I have some from Pampered Chef that I really like as well. So I'm just going to finish frosting these, and then I will sprinkle them with some rainbow sprinkles. It was fun to make this, even though it was kind of time consuming. Like I said, I haven't made frosting. Well, besides cream cheese frosting, I guess I haven't really made like a buttercream or meringue frosting for many, many years. Fun fact, when I was a kid, sort of like anywhere from like, I don't remember, like 10 to 13 maybe, I used to be really into like decorating cakes and making cakes. And for Christmas and birthday, I would always request like cake decorating supplies, like piping bags and different things like that. So anyway, I've been doing it for a long time. I'm not saying I'm that great at it, but it was something when I was a kid I used to have fun doing. So now I'm just going to sprinkle the top with some rainbow sprinkles, and you could definitely also add some like gel food coloring to the frosting if you wanted to make these a different color, but here is how they turned out.
All right, so for the vanilla confetti cake, which actually I obviously made into cupcakes and frosted, I thought this recipe was pretty good. Adam wasn't a huge fan of the frosting. He doesn't really like the whipped frosting. I used salted butter because that's all I had on hand, and if I had to do it in the future, I would probably try this frosting again, but I would obviously make sure that I used unsalted butter like the recipe called for, just because I think there was too much salt in it. Like, you could really sort of taste that salty flavor when you're eating the cupcakes, but they did turn out really pretty, and I think honestly they're really cute. They're kind of a lot of work. Like, I haven't made homemade cake in a long time. I always just use a box, and I thought that this recipe was really good. Is it worth, like, does it taste better than a box? Not really. I mean, I would consider making it again, but honestly, I think box cupcakes are just as good, and then maybe make the homemade frosting to go with it.
So the next top 10 recipe is a chicken mozzarella pasta, and this is another one that I was excited to make because it's definitely family and kid friendly, and it's fairly quick too. So what I have here is just some boneless, skinless chicken breasts. The recipe calls for 2 pounds. I probably didn't have quite 2 pounds. I maybe had 1.5 pounds. So I'm just cutting these into bite-sized chunks. This will get mixed in with the marinara sauce and then later along with the pasta. So you just want to make sure that they are in bite-sized pieces. So next I am sprinkling some salt on my chicken, and I'm going to put this into a pan that is on medium-high heat with a little bit of olive oil, and then I'll just saute the chicken breast until it is cooked through, seasoning it with a little bit of pepper and some garlic powder and some Italian seasoning and oregano as well. So while the chicken is cooking, I'm going to go ahead and chop up my onion. The recipe did call for 1 large onion, but I only ended up using half of it. We're not, huge fans of a lot of onion in any of the dishes I make, really, so that's why I decided to use half. Also, you will need some garlic, so I am just going to peel those and mince them up as well. This will end up going in the tomato sauce portion that goes with the chicken. Once the chicken is cooked, I'm just using a spatula to remove that to a plate, and I'm going to add my onion and garlic to the hot pan and just saute that until it is cooked through. After that, you can pour back in the marinara sauce and the chicken, and then I added a little bit of red pepper flake as well. I don't think I added as much as the recipe said, just because I didn't want this to be too spicy for kids. I had some marinara sauce that was in the freezer that I actually thawed out and just put into this glass measuring cup, so that's why you see it in there. So once all that is mixed together, you can turn the heat down and then just cover this and let it simmer to let the chicken finish tenderizing and all the flavors to come together. I also sprinkled in a little bit of minced parsley at the end as well. Okay, so here is the boiling water. You will need 1/2 pound of pasta. The original recipe called for 1 pound, and it said it serves 6 people. I think sometimes Pioneer Woman, her portions are kind of a little bit excessive. Like, I feel like there's no way that just 6 people could have eaten a whole pound of pasta and all this chicken. But anyway, I just used half the pasta that the recipe called for. I went ahead and cubed up my sliced mozzarella cheese. You want to make sure you use fresh mozzarella. And then I'm also going to cut up some fresh basil as well for the topping. Okay, so after the pasta was done, I drained it, put it back in the hot pot, and then I'm just adding the chicken and sauce, and I'll stir that together, and then I'll add the mozzarella cheese and just give it a gentle stir, and then let it sit until it's time to eat. The cheese will get all melty. Here's what it looks like when it's done. Really, really delicious, like I said, and kid-friendly. You could even make this with ground beef or Italian sausage if you wanted to, and here's how I served it up on a plate with a salad with some Italian dressing on the side. Thoughts on the mozzarella chicken pasta? It was really good. I would totally make it again. By the way, I'm super professional as always right now. It's Saturday night and I have no makeup on today, and I'm in my bedroom folding laundry, so this is what you get, guys. Anyway, the pasta was really good. Now, the serving size has me puzzled because the recipe calls for 1 pound of pasta and says it will serve 6 people. There is no way 6 people could eat a pound of pasta. Maybe. Like, I used half a pound of pasta, and that to me was 6 servings. Like, we each had a serving, and then I still had way more than enough for probably 3 more servings, which I froze it for later. So I would recommend cutting it in half, although I didn't cut any of the other ingredients in half. I just cut down on the pasta, and I use the same amount of chicken, so maybe that's why. But either way, I definitely don't think you need a pound of pasta, but it was really good, and I would definitely make it again. Everyone loved it, which is awesome. All right, so the next recipe is for these meat pies. They sort of remind me of empanadas, but you will use the Rhodes frozen dough, roll dough, if you know what I'm talking about. It comes like that in a big freezer bag. So you just want to set those out on the counter about 2 to 3 hours before you make this recipe. That's going to be the outside of your little meat pies. So next we'll make the filling while that is finishing rising. So I just have 1 poblano pepper here. The recipe called for 2. I went ahead and just used 1 because I didn't want it to be overly spicy, and I would recommend that. It turned out perfect. Not, a little bit of spice, but not too spicy. So I'm just mincing up this poblano pepper, and I'm going to put it in a skillet with some olive oil and saute that. You'll add ground beef, an onion, red pepper flakes, garlic, chili powder, cumin, and some tomato paste, which I'll show you here in a little bit. Here's the other half of the onion that I'm using for these. So I'm going to go ahead and get this chopped up and into the skillet along with the olive oil and the poblano, and we'll let those veggies sort of soften and saute in the skillet before we add the ground beef. I'm also adding a little bit of garlic paste as well. One tip, if you're trying to sweat out and cook vegetables, if you salt them, they will cook a little bit quicker because it will draw the water out and the moisture out of them. Next, I'm adding a pound of ground beef. The original recipe called for, let's see, a pound. What did it say? Like 1.33 pounds of ground beef or something like that, or 1.5 pounds of ground beef, I guess. I felt like 1 pound was perfect. The ground beef that we have in the freezer comes in 1 pound rolls, so it's easier for me just to substitute either 1 or 2 pounds, so I just used 1. So after everything is sauteed, you can add your seasonings and your tomato paste, and you'll also add just a little bit of water to loosen it up and sort of make a sauce. It kind of reminds me of taco meat, but it doesn't. It has a different flavor, which I appreciate, but you could definitely use taco meat for these. I think it would turn out great as well, or maybe like shredded chicken or something like that. The recipe actually also called for parsley, but since I thought this was more of like a Southwest flavor, I added cilantro, and it turned out great. We really liked it like that. The last thing is just adding in some shredded Monterey Jack cheese, and then you can go ahead and let this cool before you fill up your hand pies. Okay, so I have my little dough balls here, and I have prepared my work surface with some flour, and I have a rolling pin. So one by one, I'm taking these and rolling them out into about a 5 to 6 inch circle. Basically, you just want to roll them so that they're not super thin, but big enough that you can stuff them with the meat mixture. So I went ahead and did sort of like an assembly line, so rolled them all out first. After they're all rolled flat, you will stuff them with the meat mixture. Make sure that you brush the edges with egg wash, which you can see in that little jar I have there, just 1 egg beaten with a little bit of water. That will help seal the edges, and then we'll also use that to brush the top of them before we put them in the oven. So you don't want to fill these too full or they will split open as they bake in the oven. Just a couple spoonfuls of the beef mixture is more than enough. And then, like I said, you will brush the edges and crimp those with a fork to keep them from splitting open as well. So I'm just going to get finished with assembling all these, and then I'll put them on a baking tray. You bake them until they're golden brown on the outside, so at 400 degrees for about 10 to 12 minutes, or until they're golden brown and hot all the way through. All right, so these are all assembled. I'm just brushing the tops with some egg wash. When I make these again, I will also sprinkle the top with some salt as well. I think that would have made them a little bit more flavorful, but they still turned out really good. Here's a clip of them when they first came out of the oven. You can see they're nice and golden brown, but not burned. Really, really good, and I will definitely be making these again. Here's what the filling looks like on the inside. These would be really good dipped like in some sour cream or guacamole or salsa.
Okay, so the meat pies were a real winner. Adam actually had a couple and he's like, why haven't you been making these this whole time? I'm like, well, I didn't know they existed. But really, they were really good. I think that they would be really good. I actually did eat one dipped in sour cream. Adam thought that they would be really good dipped in like salsa or even like a queso or something like that. So that's something that I will definitely be making again. I do think that with Pioneer Woman's recipes, the portions tend to be like really, really large. So I think that you just have to consider that when you're making them, you know, if you have a family of 4 with little kids. But yeah, that recipe was good and I would definitely make them again.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of this top 10 Pioneer Woman recipes video. I had so much fun cooking and filming these recipes for you guys. If there is a different kitchen personality you'd like me to cook recipes for, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!